Have you noticed how much people love to talk about generations? Baby boomers supposedly ruined the economy. Millennials are blamed for killing off random traditions. Gen Z is accused of being glued to their phones. But right in the middle of all these conversations, there's a generation that rarely gets mentioned. Generation X, people born between 1965 and 1980. They're often the coworker who quietly keeps everything running without making a big deal about it. They're the parents who raise their kids without asking for applause. And interestingly enough, many of the people who helped build the internet we all depend on belong to this generation, even though many of them barely post online. And yet their psychology might be one of the most interesting and misunderstood of any generation alive today. Let's start with what defined them more than anything: the childhood that shaped them. One of the biggest influences on Gen X was something people used to call being a latchkey kid. Picture this. It's the late 1970s. You're 8 years old. The school bus drops you off near your house. You walk to the front door, pull out a key hanging around your neck, and let yourself inside. The house is empty. No parents, no babysitter, no phone to instantly reach someone, no iPad, no internet, no FaceTime with mom, no Ring doorbell for check-ins. You're just alone. Just you, maybe a bowl of cereal, the television with a few channels, and hours to fill until your parents got home. By the mid-1980s, around 7 million kids between the ages of 5 and 13 were regularly home alone after school. 7 millions. That's not some isolated thing. That's an entire generation learning at a very young age that's nobody coming to save you. This wasn't unusual, it was normal. And that empty house rewired their brains. Very early on, many Gen X kids learned a simple lesson. You figure things out on your own. A mindset shaped by consequences. Growing up this way meant that actions had immediate consequences. You couldn't text your parents to ask permission. You couldn't search the internet for the right answer. You made a decision, and whatever happened next, you dealt with it. When parents eventually got home, discipline was usually straightforward. If you messed up, you got punished. End of discussion. Psychologists call this a high contingency environment, where actions and outcomes are tightly connected. As a result, many people from Gen X developed a habit of thinking several steps ahead. They tend to anticipate problems before they appear. It's not necessarily pessimism. It's more like running constant mental simulations. That's how they survive. Learning not to fully trust the system. Another thing shaped their worldview. Here it gets darker. Gen X grew up watching adults preach certain values: loyalty, commitment, stability, while reality often told a different story. Divorce rates rose dramatically in the 70s and 80s. Many watched their parents devote decades to a company only to be laid off during downsizing. The lesson was hard to ignore. Systems can fail you. Psychologists sometimes describe this mindset as defensive pessimism, but Gen X just calls it a normal day. People from Gen X might hope things go well, but they tend to prepare for the worst because in their experience, the worst sometimes does show up. This isn't cynicism, it's recognizing patterns, and it builds a kind of emotional armor that can make them appear distant, when in reality, they're just protecting themselves from inevitable disappointment. Why many of them avoid social media? It's not because they don't understand technology. In fact, a lot of the infrastructure behind modern tech was built by people from this generation. The difference lies in how they view privacy. When a teenager did something embarrassing in the 80s, maybe a few friends knew about it. Eventually, everyone forgot. Today, a single mistake can live online forever. To many Gen Xers, sharing every detail of life on the internet doesn't feel liberating. It feels risky. So instead of constantly posting, many prefer to observe quietly. They watch, they scroll, but they often keep their own lives mostly offline. Humor as a coping mechanism. Another trademark of Gen X culture is ironic detachment. Everything is a little sarcastic. Nothing is taken completely seriously. Everything is a joke. Nothing's that serious. Keep it light, keep moving. Don't let anyone see you care too much. Part of this comes from the world they grew up in. During the Cold War, kids practiced nuclear fallout drills in school. Teachers told them to hide under their desk if bombs ever fell, as if a wooden desk could really protect them. At the same time, adults insisted everything was fine. Don't worry, it's normal, they said. Growing up with that kind of contradiction teaches you to keep some emotional distance. Humor becomes a way to deal with uncertainty. Sometimes you laugh so you don't have to panic. A quiet but powerful work ethic. Despite all of this, Gen X developed a very strong work ethic. But unlike other generations, they rarely advertise it. You don't usually see them posting motivational speeches about productivity or hustle culture. They simply show up and get the job done. Many started working young. Paper routes at dawn, grocery stores, fast food counters where you had to calculate change yourself if the register stopped working. These weren't resume boosters. They were early lessons in responsibility. Having seen their parents laid off despite years of loyalty, many Gen X workers don't fully trust companies. Instead, they focus on becoming highly competent and difficult to replace. Independent, yet deeply loyal. There's an interesting contradiction at the heart of Gen X. They are extremely independent. They've been solving their own problems since childhood. But when someone else needs help, they tend to step in without hesitation. No drama, no announcement, no social media post about their generosity, just action. A lot of this comes from the friendships they built growing up. When parents were often absent, friends sometimes became a second family. That loyalty stuck. Their complicated relationship with authority. Gen X tends to respect competence, not titles. If someone truly knows what they're doing, they're happy to follow their leadership. But if someone holds power without real expertise, patience runs thin. They grew up watching numerous failures from authority figures, political scandals, poorly handled crises, major historical mistakes. Iran, Contra, Vietnam, Watergate, the AIDS crisis handled with criminal negligence, economic policies that gutted the middle class. So they learned early that being in charge doesn't always mean being capable. Economic challenges across their lives. Economically, Gen X has faced several tough moments. Many older members entered the workforce during a recession. Others were hit by the dot-com crash. And the younger ones were just starting adulthood when the 2008 financial crisis hit. Experiencing multiple economic shocks has made many Gen Xers cautious. It's one reason so many maintain multiple income streams or backup plans, not necessarily out of ambition, but out of experience. Not because they are inherently or instinctively entrepreneurial by nature, but rather because through direct and deeply felt personal experience, they have come to understand on a visceral level that nothing in life is truly permanent or guaranteed to endure. Every job they take on is, in reality, only temporary, and every company, no matter how stable or trustworthy it may initially seem, will eventually let them down or fail them in some way. As a result, they adopt a mindset of diversifying their sources of income and opportunities as a matter of survival, because to rely on a single path is to risk losing everything. This way of thinking, however, does not come without consequences, as it also gives rise to a certain kind of psychological burden or emotional baggage that they must carry with them. They've learned that stability can disappear quickly, the downside of extreme independence. Research shows that people from Gen X are less likely to seek emotional support when they're stressed, not because they lack friends or family, but because they were raised with the belief that you handle problems yourself. That mindset can make them incredibly capable during crises, but it can also make vulnerability harder. A different relationship with knowledge. Before Google existed, information required effort, time, physical labor. Finding an answer often meant going to the library, searching through card catalogs, and digging through books. Because obtaining knowledge took time and work, it often stuck in memory longer. Many Gen Xers also grew up fixing things themselves. A broken bike chain? Flip the bike over and figure it out. A TV acting up? Try to repair it. No one ever called in a technician. You stepped into that role yourself. Over time, this shaped a kind of mechanical intuition within you, along with the reassuring sense that, with enough patience and the proper tools, you could eventually understand and take control of the physical world. That hands-on mindset built confidence in solving real-world problems, raising kids in a completely different world. Now, many Gen X parents are raising children in an environment that looks nothing like the one they grew up in. Constant supervision, smartphones, social media documenting every moment. They often give their kids the attention they themselves didn't always have. But sometimes they wonder whether the new generation might also be growing up more dependent and more exposed. Because in the Gen X mindset, being visible often means being vulnerable. And vulnerability get you hurt. The bridge generation. In many ways, Generation X might be the last group to remember what it felt like to truly be bored, to sit alone with their thoughts, or to solve a problem without immediately searching for the answer online. They're not better or worse than other generations. They were simply shaped by a unique moment in history, a time when the old analog world was fading and the digital age hadn't fully arrived yet. In a sense, Gen X became the bridge between those two worlds. And bridges rarely get attention or celebration. They just quietly hold everything together, which honestly might be the most Gen X trait of all. Doing the work, expecting no recognition, and moving on.